Hello everyone, today we're going to be talking about the 3-hit limiter on the hammer and how we can play around it using hammers or slight other mechanics in the game. There's actually quite a couple ways that we can do that, so I guess I'll just get right on started. First of all, for this demonstration, I'm going to be using a mod called Impact Hammer Hit Indicator Config. It lets you customize a little system with your hammer that shows you when you've done hits, so you see that little green smoke coming out. That's something I've customized, and it will get thicker and thicker as long as I keep doing hits, and after an amount of time it will slowly go away to indicate that, hey, the 3-second time has expired and you can resume your hammer hits without being punished. So I'll be using that for clarity's sake in this video, and I personally like to use it in Cybergrind and stuff like that. The download link will be in the description. Very fun mod, I love it. But let's start with a very simple fact, and that is the fact that hammer boosts, so that is hitting a core with your hammer, those actually don't count towards the 3-hit limiter in the middle of a combo. So you can see no green smoke emerge from that. So if I were to do 2 hits, right, and then a core, it wouldn't change the steam. And in fact, hitting a core with my hammer, actually, since it doesn't add on to the 3-second time, it basically can be used to add some buffer time between when you get the hit and the 3rd second when the 3-hit limiter expires. So for instance, in like, a bare bones example, if I were to do just a regular core hit, another core hit, by the time I've done that core hit, I can already resume using my hammer if I were to space out 2 core hits in between my hammers. So yeah, there's a lot of examples like this where you can exploit the fact that it strictly only relies on yellow hits for this counter to work. And yeah, that's basically what we're going to be going over today, is several different ways in which this can be done. So let's do a bit of math here. Every hammer has a 0.5 second draw time, right? So half a second. So it would take 6 hammer draw times to space out the 3-second window. And that's basically the premise of avoiding the spam, because 0.5 seconds basically lets you get away with something like that last 2 hits I just did. So that's what we're trying to sort of avoid, while still being able to use the hammer very fluidly with itself. Going off of our math here, one thing that's important to know about the Korjak jackhammer is the fact that it takes roughly 0.2 seconds to hit your core when you release it, right? And then the hit stop as well, but we're not counting the hit stop because that doesn't factor into the 3-hit limiter. What this basically does, it makes it so every time we swap to the hammer, even from another hammer, right, there's a minimum of 0.2 second extra time added on for every hit while doing a hammer boost. So we're looking for combos that explicitly put 3 seconds between our hits without factoring in that hit stop. So these next couple things are also going to be used with the Korjak jackhammer, but they're going to be a little bit more complicated. I've got videos in the description, and I will highlight them the moment that I start performing their tech, and you can see those videos through the link in the description to try them out yourself. They're a bit more complicated. So first off, let's just start out with 2 normal hits. What we can do is we can go into a double hammer boost, right, like that, which will take a lot of time out of our hammer hit cycle in order to give us a bunch of really good damage. So we're at roughly 14 damage doing something like this. So yeah, you can do that between your hammer hits in order to, if you're targeting a single target more specifically. If there's another target like over here or something and I was above it, I'd be able to hit it sooner than this one. But which would only just affect the 3-second timer a little bit. So how far away you are from your enemy when you're performing hammer tech can influence how much time is also placed between the 3-second window. So that's why doing something like this, right, barely just enough time to get that last hit, as you could see it while the steam faded away literal frames before I landed that yellow hit. So yeah, there's still stuff that you can put in between all of that. For instance, if you wanted to be really tight about it, you could do a red hit, and then your next hit would be able to be yellow because red hits don't add to the yellow hit limiter. And you could do all sorts of stuff like that. So yeah, from the top, hammer boosts do not add to the yellow hit limiter, so you can spam those as much as you want. You can spam 2 in between 1 yellow hit cycle as well, and that'll be perfectly timed to give you another hit as well. Double hammer boosts, these don't add to the timer, right? So you can use that to your advantage as well in between 2 yellow hits. And then finally, using the Korjak jackhammer, you can do RTC nukes, right? So if I were to do 2 hits, do something along those lines, right? There are more complicated ways to apply that, but in principle, all you're doing is hitting the rocket hit scan into the core, which is causing a sort of like mini nuke, which does a decent amount of damage and lights enemies on fire like the Insurrectionist. So yeah, that's another thing you can perform in between your combos to avoid getting that 3-hit limiter punish. Now, stuff like that does take roughly 1.2 seconds to perform. Same with Hammer Boost, which takes like roughly 1.3 seconds maybe. But it can be done a little bit sooner, just like 1.2. So that's not exactly enough time to be able to pull off a combo like that. Again, we are adjusting for like the distance that you are from an enemy in order to perform that tech and then space out more time between these combos. But obviously when it comes to Hammer Boost, you cannot just spam it, right? At least in its current state. This has been talk of the town in terms of what can be nerfed. But yeah, you can just sort of spam double Hammer Boost as you want and then do a hit. So you can stack that on top of itself. Same with RTC nukes, you can also spam those. Though those do cost quite a bit of stamina. Right? And like I mentioned earlier, you can use weapons like the sawed-on jackhammer to land red hits. And red hits, since they don't add to the 3-hit limiter, you can get a lot of damage with 1 hit, and it'll allow you to cycle to your next hammers for yellow hits, right? So you can either begin or end a hammer chain with a red hit so that you can get 2 hits before or after it. As well, one nice thing about the sawed-on jackhammer is that the chainsaw, the cooldown is 4 seconds, right? But as you can see, it starts slow and then it builds up. So what happens is, while the chainsaw is out and in play, the cooldown becomes 8 seconds, but when the chainsaw returns to you, the cooldown becomes 4 seconds again. So if 4 seconds have passed, then the cooldown will halve itself when the chainsaw comes to you, and it'll require only 2 seconds for it to pass. So here, I'll give you an example. Right, as you can see, the cooldown's really slow. That's 8 seconds right there. And if I let it come to me, it speeds up, right? So one of the things about the sawed-on jackhammer that you can do is you can use it to consistently land red hits, and because red hits are 7 seconds, if you play with the chainsaw a little bit in between your combos, you can sync up the actual cooldown of the chainsaw with the hammer. Right? So even if I mess up a little bit, the chainsaw's back and the hammer's back at roughly the same time. And now you can do it a little bit better, right? And it can be perfectly synced to 7 or 8 seconds. That's why a lot of people will use this weapon as their main red hit weapon. And like I was saying, you can use that red hit to space out your hits. And moreover, you know, since the red hit will give you more speed blasting back, you can use it as an escape option, which can also be used to fill the 3-second window while you're trying to escape a combo, playing sort of a hit and run play style, right? One other thing you can do to space out that 3-second window is to overpump your hammer, right? So with the pump charge hammer, it takes roughly 2 seconds to draw the weapon and then fully overpump it. So what you can do is you can perform some kind of combo in between an overpump and then come to your target and land the overpump. So for instance, if I do, you know, 2 normal hits into a hammer boost, if I overpump the hammer, roughly enough time will pass so that I can do something like that, like a pump cache. I have a video on pump caches, and I'll put the link in the description, but basically all you're doing is taking an alternate route to hit stop pumping, right? So if I'm at 2 pumps, I can pump during the hit stop for the final pump to shorten that overpump timer down from 2 seconds to 1.5 seconds, which can be nice. So for instance, you know, like if you have enough time between doing a double hammer boost to come back to your target, you can instead shorten down that time to 1.5 seconds instead of 2 if you don't need it. But instead of that, if you just do a normal overpump, right, which takes 2 seconds, when you go for a hit, you can actually pump immediately following the hit stop to add an instant pump to your hammer, right? And that can be comboed with hit stop pumps to make sure that your next hammer hit, when it's an overpump, actually takes 1 second to overpump instead of 1.5. So I'll show you. Right, like that. And so you can get 2 hits that way. You can also chain overpumps into each other with pump caching. So if I do this, right? If you do 2 in a row and you want to do a third one, right, or finish with a hit stop pump, you're gonna want to usually do a red hit because that last hit, that third hit, is going to put you on cooldown. So that's another small advice when it comes to doing pump caching and hit stop pumps. So with a little bit of math, some combos you can do, right? If you come out of 2 hits, you could do a double hammer boost. You could do an RTC nuke into a red saw hit into a hit stop overpump, which will give you exactly 1 hammer on cooldown from the red hit, right? And that chainsaw value, and will also give you the overpump value from a hit stop, right? So here, I'll show you. Right? And so there's a lot of human error involved, but in roughly that amount of time, you can space out your hammer hits using the RTC nukes, using the double hammer boosts, using your red hits on some of your hammers, right? And specifically charging the pump on the pump charge hammer. You can space out a lot of time and still get a lot of value and allow yourself to chain into yellow hits. So yeah, that's sort of all of my advice for now when it comes to, you know, playing around the 3-second limiter. There are some cool and interesting things you can do to manipulate it to get some interesting value. I mean, it's not nearly close to what we could get earlier in the previous patch. That's fine. Like I said, I'm okay with a 3-hit limiter. This is okay. I just think it needs to be polished a lot, and some numbers need to be tweaked. But for now, this is what we're settling with, and I hope this video serves you, specifically you triple hammer users. So yeah, I'll see ya.